Being a grandfather has always been my greatest pride. But one day, instead of the innocent hugs of my grandchildren, all I received was a slammed door and the cold words of my daughter-in-law, "You'll never see them again." It felt like a piece of my very soul had been ripped away. The pain consumed me. I spent sleepless nights, feeling the poison of ingratitude corrode every memory I once held dear. But amid the sorrow, something was born inside me, the certainty that I would not let that humiliation go unpunished. I had to prove that even a grandfather's heart knows how to strike back. And so, I turned my pain into a silent plan, a revenge she could never see coming. A calculated move that would one day knock on her door and change the course of our story forever. Because when someone tries to destroy the bond between grandfather and grandchild, they're not just hurting one person, they're wounding the very essence of family. And sometimes only a firm response can restore the dignity that was taken from us. This is my story. Hi, my name is John Miller. And today I'll tell you how the pain I endured became an unforgettable lesson. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and share in the comments. Have you ever been wronged by your own family? But before I reveal what I prepared for my daughter-in-law and how her life was turned upside down afterward, I need to tell you who I was before this wound was opened and why, sadly, we reached such a heartbreaking family moment. Let me take you back to where it all began, in the autumn of 2023, in my hometown of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I'm John Miller, 62 years old, a widower for the past 4 years since my beloved Margaret passed away from cancer. For 35 years, I built Miller Construction from a one-man operation into one of the most respected construction companies in eastern Iowa. We specialized in custom homes and commercial buildings, the kind of solid, honest work that put food on tables and roofs over families' heads. After Margaret died, I sold the business to my longtime foreman, Carl Peterson, for a fair price that set me up comfortably for retirement. But retirement wasn't about golf courses or fishing trips for me. It was about being the grandfather I'd always dreamed of becoming. You see, my son David had married Jessica 3 years earlier, and they'd blessed me with twin grandchildren, Emma and Tyler, who were 8 years old that fateful autumn. Those kids were my entire world. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I'd pick them up from Riverside Elementary School in my old Chevy Silverado, the same truck I'd driven to job sites for 15 years. Emma would climb into the passenger seat and immediately start chattering about her art projects, while Tyler would scramble into the back and launch into detailed explanations of whatever book he was reading. The boy was brilliant, already reading, at a high school level, while Emma had inherited her grandmother's artistic soul. Our routine was sacred to me. We'd stop at Murphy's ice cream parlor on First Avenue, where old Murphy himself would always have their favorites ready: strawberry swirl for Emma, chocolate chip cookie dough for Tyler. Then we'd head to my house on Maple Street, the same house, where I'd raised David, where Margaret had tended her prize-winning rose garden. In my garage workshop, I'd been teaching Tyler basic woodworking. His small hands would grip the sandpaper with such concentration as we worked on a birdhouse together. "Grandpa John," he'd say, his serious brown eyes studying the wood grain. "When I grow up, I want to build houses just like you did." Meanwhile, Emma would be in Margaret's old craft room, painting watercolors or working on the scrapbook I'd bought her, documenting all our adventures together. David worked as a software engineer for a company in Des Moines, which meant a 90-minute commute each way. Good money, but long hours that kept him away from the family more than I would have liked. Jessica didn't work outside the home, which I fully supported. Raising children is the most important job in the world, and I was grateful she was there. For Emma and Tyler, or so I thought. You see, I'd been generous with my son's family, perhaps too generous. When they'd gotten married, I'd given them the down payment for their house in the newer development on the west side of town, a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial with a big backyard where the kids could play. When Jessica mentioned wanting to redecorate, I quietly covered the costs. When they needed a new car for the growing family, I co-signed the loan and made half the payments. I never asked for recognition or gratitude. This was my family, my blood, and after losing Margaret, they were all I had left in this world. The money meant nothing compared to watching Emma's face light up when I surprised her with art supplies, or seeing Tyler's excitement when I brought him a new book series. Every weekend, I'd have the kids over for what we called Grandpa Sundays. I'd make pancakes in the morning using Margaret's secret recipe, extra vanilla and a pinch of cinnamon. We'd go to the park if the weather was nice, or build blanket forts in the living room when it rained. I taught them card games, told them stories about their father when he was their age, and listened to their dreams and fears with the patience that only a grandfather's love can provide. Jessica seemed to appreciate my involvement, at least on the surface. She'd smile when I arrived to pick up the kids, thank me for the various expenses I covered, and even invite me for dinner occasionally. But looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way her smile never quite reached her eyes. How she'd always have some reason why the kids couldn't stay longer at my house. The subtle comments about not wanting to spoil them too much. The first real warning sign came in September 2023. I'd taken Emma and Tyler school shopping, as had become our tradition. We spent the day at the mall in Iowa City, letting them pick out clothes and supplies while I marveled at how much they'd grown over the summer. Emma had developed strong opinions about fashion, insisting on a purple backpack with sparkles. Tyler, practical like his grandfather, chose a plain blue one, but splurged on a set of fancy mechanical pencils. When I brought them home that evening, arms full of shopping bags, Jessica met us at the door with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold. Calculating. "John, we need to talk," she said, barely acknowledging the children's excited chatter about their new things. "Kids, go upstairs and start getting ready for dinner." I followed her into the kitchen, confused by her sudden shift in demeanor. The house smelled like the pot roast she'd been cooking, a smell that usually meant warmth and family comfort. But something felt different, tension crackling in the air like electricity before a storm. "I appreciate everything you do for the kids," Jessica began, but her tone suggested anything but appreciation. "But I think we need to establish some boundaries." Boundaries. The word hit me like a cold slap. What kind of boundaries? "Well, for starters, I'd prefer if you checked with me before taking them shopping. I'm their mother, and I should have a say in what they're buying." She gestured toward the bags still sitting on the kitchen counter. "Some of these clothes are too expensive, too mature for their age." I looked at the bags, remembering Emma's delight over a simple sundress that cost maybe $30. Tyler's careful consideration of different sneakers before choosing the most practical pair. "Jessica, they're just kids' clothes, nothing inappropriate or excessive. That's not the point, John." Her voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. "The point is respect for my role as their parent. David and I are perfectly capable of providing for our children without constant assistance." The word assistance dripped with something that sounded dangerously close to resentment. I felt my chest tighten with the first stirrings of unease. "I never meant to overstep. I just enjoy spoiling them a little. Isn't that what grandfathers are for? Maybe that's the problem." Jessica crossed her arms, her green eyes hard as winter. "Ice. They're starting to expect these extravagant outings, these expensive gifts. It's not healthy for children to grow up thinking money grows on trees." I wanted to point out that I'd grown up poor, that I understood the value of money better than most, that everything I'd given them came from 40 years of hard work and careful saving. But something in Jessica's posture warned me that this conversation was about more than shopping trips and spending limits. "What are you really saying, Jessica?" She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face like she was weighing her words. Carefully. Finally she sighed, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a tone of forced patience, like she was explaining something to a child. "John, I think it would be best if we reduce the frequency of your visits with Emma and Tyler. Maybe once a week instead of twice. And I'd like advance notice so I can plan around it." The words hit me like a physical blow. Reduce visits? Plan around seeing my own grandchildren? I don't understand. Have I done something wrong? Are the kids complaining about spending time with me? "It's not about you personally," she said, though everything about her body language suggested it was exactly about me personally. "It's about creating structure and consistency in their lives. Children need routine, not constant disruption." Disruption. She was calling my presence in my grandchildren's lives a disruption. I felt something cold and hard settling in my chest, a feeling I hadn't experienced since the day the doctor told me Margaret's cancer had spread beyond treatment. Jessica, those kids are the most important thing in my life. Spending time with them isn't disruption, it's family. I understand that, but no, I don't think you do understand. My voice remained calm, but inside I could feel something shifting, like tectonic plates moving deep beneath the Earth's surface. "Those children are my son's kids. They're my blood. I've been part of their lives since the day they were born." "And you still will be," she said quickly, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Just differently, more structured, more appropriate." Before I could respond, David's car pulled into the driveway. I heard his key in the front door, his tired voice calling out greetings to his family. Jessica's demeanor immediately shifted, warmth flooding back into her expression like someone had flipped a switch. "We'll discuss this more later," she whispered as David entered the kitchen, loosening his tie after another long day. But we never did discuss it more. At least, not in the way I expected. Instead, over the following weeks, I began to notice subtle changes. My usual pickup days became complicated by sudden appointments or activities the kids supposedly had. When I did see Emma and Tyler, Jessica hovered nearby, monitoring our conversations with the intensity of a prison guard. The easy, natural flow of our relationship became forced and artificial. The kids noticed too. "Why can't we go to your house any more, Grandpa John?" Emma asked one afternoon when I'd been limited to a supervised visit in their living room. "I want to finish painting the sunset picture in Grandma's craft room." "Soon, sweetheart," I told her, not knowing it was a lie. Soon, but soon never came. Instead, what came was the phone call that changed everything. The call that revealed Jessica's true intentions and set me on a path I never could have imagined. It was October 15th, 2023, a date now burned into my memory like a brand. The autumn leaves were at their peak in Cedar Rapids, the maples and oaks painting the town in brilliant reds and golds that Margaret had always loved. I was in my workshop, trying to sand away the frustration of another cancelled visit with the kids. When my phone rang, David's name appeared on the screen, and I answered with the hope that maybe my son was calling to restore some sanity to this situation. "Dad, we need to talk." His voice sounded strained, tired in a way that went beyond his usual work stress. "Of course, son. What's on your mind?" "It's about the kids, Dad. About the visits." My hand tightened on the phone. "What about them?" "Jessica and I have been discussing it, and we think it would be best if you didn't see Emma and Tyler for a while." The words seemed to echo in my empty workshop, bouncing off the tools and half-finished projects that suddenly felt meaningless. "David, what are you talking about?" "It's temporary, Dad, just until we can figure out a better arrangement." "Jessica, feels like the kids are getting confused about boundaries, about who's in charge. She thinks your influence is challenging her authority as their mother. My influence, as if loving my grandchildren was some kind of subversive act." "Son, I've never done anything to undermine Jessica's authority." I've always supported both of you. I know, Dad, I know. But you have to understand Jessica's position. She's with them all day, every day. She sees things that maybe you don't see. What things, David? What exactly am I supposed to have done wrong? There was a long pause, and when David spoke again, his voice carried the tone of a man reciting words someone else had given him. The expensive gifts, the constant outings, the way you question her decisions about their schedules and activities. She feels like you're trying to be their parent instead of their grandfather. Every accusation felt like a dagger to the heart. Expensive gifts. I'd bought them ice cream and school clothes, constant outings, 2 visits a week to spend time with the only family I had left. Questioning her decisions. I'd never voiced a single criticism of Jessica's parenting, not once. David, this is insane. Those kids love me and I love them. We're not talking about some stranger off the street. I'm their grandfather, and you'll always be their grandfather, Dad. Nothing changes that. But right now, Jessica needs space to establish her role without feeling like she's competing for their attention. Competing for their attention. The phrase revealed more than David probably intended. This wasn't about boundaries or parenting philosophy. This was about control, about Jessica's need to be the only significant adult in those children's lives. How? Long is a while, son? Another pause. We're not sure yet. Maybe a few months, maybe until after the holidays. After the holidays. She was planning to steal Christmas from me, to deny me the joy of watching Emma and Tyler open presents under the tree, of teaching Tyler how to carve the turkey, of helping Emma make sugar cookies using Margaret's recipe. David, please think about what you're saying. Think about what this will do to Emma and Tyler. They're going to wonder why Grandpa John suddenly disappeared from their lives. We'll explain it to them in an age-appropriate way. Kids are resilient, Dad. They'll understand. No, they wouldn't understand. How could they? How do you explain to an 8-year-old that the grandfather who's been a constant presence in their life is suddenly unwelcome because their mother feels threatened by his love? Son, I'm begging you to reconsider this. Don't let Jessica manipulate you into destroying my relationship with those kids. Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Jessica isn't manipulating anyone. She's just trying to do what's best for our family. Our family. Not my family anymore, apparently. I hung up that phone feeling like I'd just been diagnosed with a terminal disease. The workshop around me, filled with 40 years of accumulated tools and memories, felt like a mausoleum. The silence was deafening, broken only by the October wind rattling the windows. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in Margaret's chair in our living room, staring at the photos of Emma and Tyler that covered every surface. Their first steps, their first words, birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesday afternoons that had suddenly become precious beyond measure. I thought about calling Jessica directly, about demanding an explanation for this sudden exile. I thought about showing up at their house and refusing to leave until I could see my grandchildren. I thought about hiring a lawyer, about fighting for grandparents' rights, about doing something, anything, to maintain the connection that meant more to me than my own life. But I didn't do any of those things. Not yet. Instead, I made a different decision. One that would prove far more effective than any lawyer or direct confrontation could ever be. I decided to find out exactly what Jessica was really up to, and why she was so desperate to remove me from my grandchildren's lives, because in my 62 years on this earth, I'd learned that when someone's behavior doesn't make logical sense, there's usually a hidden motive driving their actions. Jessica claimed she wanted to protect her children from my excessive influence. But I suspected she was protecting something else entirely. Something that would explain her sudden hostility, her need for control, her determination to isolate Emma and Tyler from the grandfather who loved them unconditionally. What I discovered over the following weeks would shock me to my core and set in motion a plan so comprehensive, so perfectly calculated, that even I was surprised by my own capacity for strategic thinking. Because when someone tries to steal your family, when they use innocent children as weapons in their twisted game of control, they don't just deserve consequences, they deserve justice. The first week after David's phone call was the longest of my life. I wandered through my empty house like a ghost, picking up toys that Emma and Tyler had left behind during their last visit. A half-finished puzzle on the dining room table. Tyler's reading glasses, forgotten on the kitchen counter. Emma's latest drawing, still stuck to my refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a sunflower. Every morning, I'd catch myself setting 3 places at the breakfast table before remembering that Tuesday and Thursday pickups were over. The silence was suffocating. For 4 years since Margaret's death, those children had been my lifeline, my reason to get up in the morning and face another day without my beloved wife. But grief, I was learning, could be a powerful motivator for action. On the 8th day, I made a decision that would change everything. I called my old friend Pete Kowalski, who ran a small private investigation firm out of Iowa City. Pete and I had worked together on several construction projects over the years, and I knew him to be thorough, discreet, and absolutely trustworthy. "John Miller," Pete's gravelly voice carried genuine warmth when he answered the phone. "Been too long, old friend. What can I do for you?" "Pete, I need your professional services. It's a family matter." "Say no more. Can you come in today?" 2 hours later, I was sitting in Pete's modest office above a hardware store on Clinton Street, explaining the situation while he took careful notes. Pete was in his late 50s, a retired police detective with steel-grey hair and the kind of eyes that missed nothing. "So your daughter-in-law suddenly wants you out of the picture," Pete summarized, tapping his pen against his notepad. "Claims it's about boundaries and parenting authority. That's her story. But you don't buy it." I leaned forward in my chair. "Pete, I've been in business for 35 years. I know when someone's lying, and I know when someone's hiding something. Jessica's behavior doesn't add up. This isn't about protecting her children or establishing authority. There's something else going on." Pete nodded slowly. "What kind of investigation are you looking for?" "Everything. Financial records, daily activities, phone calls, internet usage. I want to know what Jessica does all day while David's at work and the kids are at school. John, I have to ask, what are you planning to do with this information?" I met his steady gaze. "I'm going to get my grandchildren back, Pete, whatever it takes." Pete studied my face for a long moment, then opened his desk drawer and pulled out a standard contract. "Standard rate is $50 an hour plus expenses. I'll need a retainer of $2,000 to get started." I wrote the check without hesitation. "Give me a week," Pete said, shaking my hand. "I'll start with basic surveillance and financial background checks. If there's something to find, I'll find it." While Pete began his investigation, I started my own more subtle research. I drove past David and Jessica's house at different times of day, noting patterns. Jessica's car, a white Honda Odyssey that I'd helped them buy, was rarely in the driveway during school hours. For someone who supposedly stayed home with the children, she seemed to be out an awful lot. I also began paying closer attention to social media. Jessica was active on Facebook and Instagram, constantly posting photos of expensive dinners, spa days, and shopping trips. The clothes she wore in these photos were designer brands that should have been well beyond their budget, even with David's decent salary and my financial contributions. On Thursday afternoon, exactly 1 week after Pete had taken my case, he called with news that made my blood run cold. "John, you need to come in. Today." I found Pete in his office, surrounded by photographs, bank statements, and computer printouts that covered every surface of his desk. His expression was grim. "Sit down, old friend. What I'm about to show you isn't going to be easy to hear." Pete handed me a manila folder thick with documentation. "Let's start with the financial picture. Your daughter-in-law has been lying about more than just her reasons for keeping you from the kids." The first document was a credit report showing Jessica's personal debts. My hands trembled as I read the numbers. 17 different credit cards, all maxed out, personal loans from 3 different banks. Store credit accounts that totaled more than $30,000 in debt. "How is this possible?" I asked. "David's making good money, and I've been helping with major expenses." "Keep reading," Pete said grimly. The next section revealed the source of Jessica's spending: online gambling, poker sites, slot machine apps, sports betting platforms. The transaction history showed deposits ranging from $50 to $500, sometimes multiple times per day. "She's got a serious gambling addiction, John. Based on these records, I estimate she's lost somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000 in the past 18 months. My chest felt tight as the implications hit me. The money I've been giving them for the kids' expenses, for the house payment help, going straight into online casinos." Pete pulled out another set of documents. "But that's not the worst of it." He showed me photographs taken with a long-range lens. Jessica entering a pawn shop on the south side of Iowa City. Jessica meeting with a man in an expensive suit in the parking lot of a strip mall. Jessica loading boxes into her car from what appeared to be a storage unit. "She's been selling things, John. Expensive things. Remember those gifts you bought for the kids? The jewelry you gave her for Christmas and birthdays? The electronics you purchased for the house?" I nodded, unable to speak. "All sold. Every single item worth more than $100. She's been systematically converting your generosity into gambling money." Pete handed me the final set of photographs, and my world tilted on its axis. Jessica embracing a man who wasn't my son. Jessica and this stranger entering a motel together. Jessica laughing as they shared drinks at a bar in Cedar Falls. Clearly intimate, clearly involved. "Who is he?" I managed to ask. "Marcus Webb, real estate agent based out of Cedar Falls. Divorced, drives a BMW, and according to my sources, he's the one who's been encouraging Jessica's gambling habit. Apparently, he's got connections to some high-stakes private games that require serious money to buy in." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of Jessica's deception. The woman who'd claimed I was a negative influence on her. Children was a gambling addict who was stealing from her family and cheating on her husband. The woman who wanted to protect Emma and Tyler from my excessive involvement was putting their financial security at risk to feed her addiction. "There's more," Pete said gently, "and this is the part that's going to hurt the most." He pulled out a transcript of text messages between Jessica and Marcus Webb. Pete's contacts in the tech world had apparently been able to recover these from Jessica's deleted files. Jessica: "Kids asking about Grandpa again." David starting to question the separation. Marcus: "Stick to the plan. Once you sell the house, we can relocate and start fresh. No more interference from family." Jessica: "What if David won't agree to move?" Marcus: "He will if you play it right. Make him think it's for his career. I've got connections in Arizona that can offer him a better position." Jessica: "And what about the old man? He's not going to just disappear." Marcus: "He will if he has no legal standing. Once you move out of state, grandparents' rights become much harder to enforce." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. This wasn't just about boundaries or parenting authority. Jessica and her lover were planning to steal my grandchildren permanently, to move them across the country where I'd never see them again. "When?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Based on these messages, they're planning to put the house on the market after the first of the year." Jessica's been working on David gradually, planting seeds about career opportunities and fresh starts. I closed the folder and sat back in my chair, my mind racing. Everything made sense now. Jessica's sudden hostility toward me, her need to establish distance between me and the children, her claims about my negative influence. She was preparing to cut all ties, to disappear with Emma and Tyler and leave me with nothing but memories. "What are you going to do, John?" Pete asked. I looked at my old friend, seeing concern in his eyes. Pete had given me the ammunition I needed to destroy Jessica completely. I could expose her gambling addiction, her affair, her theft of the children's gifts. I could show David the evidence and watch his marriage implode. I could file for grandparents' rights and drag this whole mess through the courts. But as I sat there, surrounded by the evidence of Jessica's betrayal, a different plan began forming in my mind. A plan that would be far more effective than simple exposure, far more devastating than a messy divorce, and far more satisfying than any legal victory. Jessica thought she was playing chess with a sentimental old man who'd roll over and accept defeat. She had no idea she was actually dealing with someone who'd built a successful business from nothing, someone who understood strategy and long-term planning, someone who'd learned patience and precision from 40 years of solving complex problems. "Pete," I said, standing up and gathering the evidence, "I need you to keep monitoring her activities, every move, every transaction, every meeting with this Marcus character. Can you do that?" "Of course. What are you planning?" I smiled for the first time in weeks. "I'm going to teach Jessica that when you try to steal someone's family, you better make sure you've thought through all the consequences. John, whatever you're thinking, be careful. Don't do anything that could backfire and hurt your relationship with those kids even more. Don't worry, Pete. What I have in mind will ensure I never lose access to Emma and Tyler again." As I drove home that evening, my mind was already 3 steps ahead, calculating moves and counter-moves like the strategic businessman I'd always been. Jessica wanted to play games with my family? Fine. But she was about to discover that some games have stakes higher than she'd ever imagined, and this particular game was going to end with her begging for my forgiveness. The evidence Pete had gathered was devastating, but it was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I would systematically dismantle every aspect of Jessica's deception while positioning myself not as her enemy, but as her unlikely savior. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destruction. Sometimes it's forcing someone to face their own conscience. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in patience and strategic planning. While Jessica continued her charade of protective motherhood and David remained obliviously trapped in his demanding work schedule, I began orchestrating a campaign that would expose every lie she'd built her new life upon. But I wasn't interested in simple exposure. Any fool could dump evidence on David's desk and watch the marriage explode. What I wanted was something far more sophisticated. I wanted Jessica to destroy herself while I positioned myself as the family's salvation. My first move was financial reconnaissance. Using contacts from my construction business, I traced the paper trail of Jessica's gambling addiction with forensic precision. What Pete had discovered was just the tip of the iceberg. Through a friend who worked in banking compliance, I learned that Jessica had opened secret credit lines using David's information, forging his signature on loan applications. She wasn't just gambling away my gifts and their family money. She was systematically stealing David's identity to fund her addiction. The amounts were staggering. In the past 6 months alone, she'd racked up nearly $40,000 in fraudulent debt under David's name, credit cards he didn't know existed, personal loans from predatory lenders, even a second mortgage on their house that David had never seen. But here's where my plan got interesting. Instead of exposing these crimes immediately, I began quietly paying them off. You see, I understood something about leverage that Jessica didn't. When someone owes money to banks and credit companies, they're just another defaulted account. But when they owe money to someone who knows all their secrets, someone who has the power to destroy their life with a single phone call, that's real control. Every debt I paid created a paper trail that led back to me. Every forged signature I covered became evidence of Jessica's criminal activity that only I possessed. I wasn't just building a case against her, I was buying ownership of her future. My second move was even more calculated. I hired Marcus Webb. Yes, you heard that right. I hired Jessica's lover to sell me a property. Through a shell company I'd established years ago for investment purposes, I contacted Marcus about purchasing a small commercial building in Cedar Falls. Nothing suspicious, just a cash buyer looking for income property. Marcus, like most real estate agents, saw dollar signs and eagerly took the listing. What Marcus didn't realize was that his new client was building a comprehensive dossier on his personal and professional activities. Every meeting gave me insight into his character, his methods, and most importantly, his relationship with Jessica. Marcus Webb was exactly what I'd expected: smooth, charming, and completely amoral. During our third meeting, he casually mentioned knowing some interesting investment opportunities for someone with my apparent wealth. When I expressed interest, he began describing underground poker games and private betting circles that promised huge returns for serious players. It didn't take long to understand that Marcus wasn't just Jessica's lover. He was her dealer, the one feeding her gambling addiction while promising her that the next big win would solve all their problems. The thing about these high-stakes games, Marcus explained over coffee at a downtown Cedar Falls cafe, is that they're not really about gambling. They're about networking, about meeting the right people who can open doors to bigger opportunities. I nodded sagely, playing the role of interested investor while my phone recorded every word. Sounds fascinating. I've always been a conservative investor, but maybe it's time to take some calculated risks. Marcus's eyes lit up with predatory enthusiasm. I'll tell you what, John, there's a private game next Friday night. Buy-in is $10,000, but the potential returns are extraordinary. I could introduce you to some people, get you started. 10,000. I whistled softly. That's serious money. That's exactly why it works. These aren't desperate gamblers throwing away grocery money. These are successful business people, professionals who understand that sometimes you have to spend money to make money. What Marcus didn't mention was that these successful business people included housewives like Jessica who were gambling away their children's college funds and stealing from their families to chase impossible dreams. Over the following week, I let Marcus believe he was recruiting me into his network of high-stakes players. I expressed enthusiasm for the Friday game while secretly coordinating with Pete to document everything. By the time Friday arrived, I had a complete surveillance operation in place. The game was held in a private room above a restaurant in Cedar. The kind of quasi-legal operation that existed in the gray areas of Iowa's gambling laws. Pete's cameras captured Jessica arriving 20 minutes before the scheduled start time, her face flushed with the excitement of an addict about to get her fix. I watched from my car across the street as she embraced Marcus in the parking lot, their body language revealing an intimacy that would devastate David if he saw it. But more importantly, I watched her hand Marcus an envelope that undoubtedly contained money she'd stolen from our family. The game lasted until nearly 3 a.m., when Jessica finally emerged. Her posture told the story before she even reached her car. Shoulders slumped, head down, the defeated walk of someone who just lost money she couldn't afford to lose. Pete's financial monitoring confirmed what I'd suspected. Jessica had lost $8,000 that night, money she'd obtained by pawning her wedding ring and a diamond necklace I'd given her for her birthday. But this wasn't just another gambling loss. This was the night Jessica crossed a line that would give me everything I needed to implement the final phase of my plan. Because when someone steals their own wedding ring to fund their gambling addiction, they've demonstrated a level of moral bankruptcy that no reasonable person can ignore, not even a husband blinded by love and long work hours. The next morning, I made a phone call that would begin Jessica's downfall. "David, son, I was wondering if you and the family might join me for dinner this Sunday. I know things have been strained between us, but I miss seeing everyone." David's voice carried the exhaustion of a man juggling too many responsibilities. "Dad, I appreciate the invitation, but Jessica still feels like we need more time to work through the boundary issues. I understand, son, but I was hoping we could discuss some things that have come to my attention. Things that affect the whole family's financial security." "What kind of things?" "Nothing alarming," I lied smoothly. "Just some investment opportunities that might benefit you and Jessica, maybe help with the kids' college funds." David was quiet for a moment. "Let me talk to Jessica and see what she says." "Of course." "And David, tell Jessica that I've been thinking about what she said regarding boundaries. She might be surprised by how much I've learned about respecting people's decisions." That afternoon, Jessica called me directly for the first time in over a month. Her voice carried a forced cheerfulness that barely masked her underlying anxiety. "John, David mentioned you wanted to discuss some investment opportunities with us." "That's right, Jessica. I've been exploring some new financial strategies that might benefit the whole family." "What kind of strategies?" "Well, I'd rather discuss the details in person. But let's just say I've discovered some interesting ways to maximize returns on money that might otherwise be unavailable for family use." The pause told me she'd caught my subtle implication. Jessica was smart enough to recognize a threat wrapped in polite language. "I see. And you think we should discuss this as a family?" "I think it's important for all of us to be on the same page financially. Transparency is so important in family. Relationships, don't you think?" Another pause. Yes, it certainly is." "Wonderful. So Sunday dinner works for everyone?" "I'll make sure we're available." After Jessica hung up, I sat in my kitchen, feeling something I hadn't experienced in weeks' anticipation. Not the vindictive satisfaction of revenge, but the calm confidence of a chess player who just positioned his pieces for checkmate. Sunday would be the beginning of the end of Jessica's deception, but it wouldn't be the explosive confrontation she was probably expecting. Instead, it would be the first move in a campaign of psychological pressure that would force her to confess everything voluntarily. You see, what Jessica didn't understand about me was that 40 years in construction had taught me the value of a solid foundation. You don't build something to last by rushing the process or cutting corners. You plan carefully, you lay the groundwork methodically, and you make sure every element is perfectly positioned before you begin the final phase. Jessica had spent months building her house of lies on a foundation of sand. Sunday dinner would be the moment I showed her exactly how unstable that foundation really was. But first, I had one more piece to put in place, one final element that would guarantee Jessica's complete psychological collapse when the truth finally came to light. Picked up my phone and dialed Pete's number. "Pete, it's John. I need you to arrange a meeting with someone, Marcus Webb's ex-wife. I want to know everything about the man who's been destroying my family." "John, what are you planning?" "I'm planning to give Jessica exactly what she deserves. The truth about the man she's been risking everything for. Because sometimes the cruelest revenge isn't destroying someone's life. Sometimes it's showing them that they've already destroyed it themselves. What do you think so far? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone close to you was leading a double life. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments as we continue this story of deception, family loyalty, and how far a grandfather like me is willing to go to protect the children he loves. Sunday arrived with the crisp clarity of a November morning in Cedar Rapids. I'd spent 3 days preparing for this dinner with the meticulous attention to detail that had made Miller Construction successful for 35 years. Every element of my plan was in place, every piece of evidence organized, every psychological pressure point identified and ready to deploy. But as I set the dining room table with Margaret's good china, the same plates we'd used for countless family dinners when David was growing up, I felt something unexpected, sadness, not for what I was about to do, but for what Jessica had forced me to become. I'd always been a straightforward man, honest in my business dealings, direct in my personal relationships, transparent in my love for my family. But Jessica's deception had taught me that sometimes good people have to use dark methods to protect what matters most. At exactly 6 p.m., David's car pulled into my driveway. Through the window, I watched my son emerge from the driver's seat, his shoulders carrying the weight of a man juggling too many responsibilities. Jessica climbed out of the passenger side, her movements careful and controlled, like someone walking through a minefield. But it was the sight of Emma and Tyler bounding out of the back seat that nearly broke my resolve. 3 weeks without seeing them felt like 3 years. Emma had grown taller, her dark hair longer than I remembered. Tyler wore new glasses that made him look even more scholarly than before. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath and opened the door to my fractured family. "Grandpa John!" Emma's squeal of delight cut through all the tension as she launched herself into my arms. Tyler was more reserved, the way 8-year-old boys often are, but his hug was just as fierce. "Hey there, my beautiful grandchildren," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I've missed you both so much." "We missed you too, Grandpa," Tyler said seriously. "Mom said you were busy with important business stuff." I glanced over their heads at Jessica, who had the grace to look ashamed. "Well, I'm never too busy for my favorite people in the world." David stepped forward, and I embraced my son with genuine warmth. Whatever was about to happen tonight, he was as much a victim of Jessica's deception as I was. "Dad, thank you for having us. I know things have been complicated lately." "Nothing that can't be worked through with honest conversation," I replied, my eyes meeting Jessica's. She managed a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'd prepared a meal that would remind everyone of better times. Pot roast with vegetables, the same recipe Margaret had used for special occasions. Homemade dinner rolls that filled the house with the warm, yeasty smell of family comfort. Apple pie cooling on the kitchen counter, made from the last of the season's fruit, from the tree Margaret had planted in our backyard. As we gathered around the dining room table, I watched Jessica's eyes dart nervously around the room. She was looking for signs of my intentions, trying to read the subtext in my hospitality, but all she saw was the same grandfather who'd always welcomed this family with open arms. "So, Dad," David said as I carved the roast, "you mentioned some investment opportunities. All in good time, son. First, let's enjoy being together as a family. It's been too long." The children chatted excitedly about school, their friends, the books Tyler was reading, the art project Emma was working on for the school's holiday display. Normal family conversation that gradually relaxed everyone except Jessica, who picked at her food with obvious anxiety. "Grandpa John," Emma said between bites of pot roast, "why haven't you picked us up from school lately? I missed going to your workshop." The question hung in the air like a live wire. David's face flushed slightly, and Jessica's fork clattered against her plate. "Well, sweetheart," I said carefully, "your mom and dad thought it might be good for you to have a more regular routine, less disruption to your schedule." But I liked our routine. Tyler said with the logical precision he'd inherited from his engineer father. Tuesday and Thursday were my favorite days. Jessica finally spoke, her voice artificially bright. Children need consistency, honey, and sometimes grown-ups have to make difficult decisions about what's best for the family. But Grandpa John, his family, Emma protested with 8-year-old clarity that cut straight to the heart of the matter. Of course he is, Jessica said quickly. That's not what I meant. I reached across the table and squeezed Emma's hand. Your mom is absolutely right about family being important. In fact, that's one of the things I wanted to discuss tonight. How important it is for families to be honest with each other, to trust each other, to protect each other from people who might want to hurt them. Jessica's face went pale. She understood the implications, even if David and the children didn't. What kind of people, Grandpa? Tyler asked with the curiosity of a boy who read mystery novels. Well, I said, meeting Jessica's terrified gaze, sometimes people pretend to be your friend, but they're really just trying to take advantage of you. They might promise you exciting opportunities or easy money, but what they're really doing is leading you away from the people who truly love you. David frowned, sensing undercurrents he couldn't quite identify. Dad, is there something specific you're concerned about? Actually, yes, but let's finish dinner first. Then we can talk about protecting our family's future. The rest of the meal passed in tense silence, punctuated by the children's innocent conversation. Jessica barely ate, her eyes fixed on her plate, as if she could hide from the reckoning that was coming. After dinner, I suggested the children go play in the living room while the adults had coffee in the kitchen. Emma and Tyler ran off happily, excited to rediscover the toys and books they'd left during their last visit. In the kitchen, I poured coffee from Margaret's old percolator and set out cream and sugar on the counter. The familiar ritual gave me time to observe Jessica, who looked like a woman facing execution. So, Dad, David said, settling into a chair at the kitchen table, what's this about investment opportunities? I sat down across from him, Jessica between us, like a prisoner flanked by guards. David, how much do you know about Jessica's financial activities while you're at work? The question hit the table like a bomb. David's brow furrowed in confusion, while Jessica's face went white as paper. What do you mean? Jessica manages our household expenses while I'm working. We discuss major purchases together. I see. And you're aware of all the credit accounts in your name? Credit accounts? David looked from me to Jessica. We have one joint credit card that we use for groceries and gas. Why? I pulled out the first folder Pete had prepared, thick with bank statements and credit reports. Son, according to these documents, you currently have 17 different credit accounts in your name. The total debt is just over $78,000. David's coffee cup slipped from his fingers, shattering against the kitchen floor. That's impossible. Jessica made a sound like a wounded animal. John, please. Please what, Jessica? Please continue lying to your husband. Please keep stealing his identity to fund your gambling addiction. Gambling addiction? David's voice rose dangerously. What the hell is going on here? I handed him the credit reports, watching his face transform as he absorbed the magnitude of Jessica's deception. 17 maxed-out credit cards, personal loans from 3 different banks, a second mortgage on their house that he'd never authorized. David, I'm sorry, Jessica whispered, tears streaming down her face. I can explain everything. You forged my signature, David said, his voice hollow with shock. On loan applications, on a mortgage. Jesus Christ, Jessica, you could go to prison for this. It started small, she said desperately, just a few dollars here and there. But then I started winning, and I thought I could make enough to pay everything back before you found out. Winning what? David demanded. I answered for her. Online poker, casino apps, high-stakes private games in Cedar Falls. Jessica's been gambling away your family's financial security for over a year. David stared at his wife like she was a stranger. The kids' college funds, our retirement savings? Jessica nodded miserably. But I can fix this. I have a system now, a strategy that— Stop! David's voice cut through her desperate explanation like a blade. Just stop talking. In the sudden silence, we could hear Emma and Tyler playing in the living room, their innocent laughter a heartbreaking contrast to the devastation unfolding in the kitchen. There's more, I said gently. Jessica, would you like to tell David about Marcus Webb, or should I? The name hit Jessica like a physical blow. She doubled over in her chair, sobbing with the desperation of someone whose carefully constructed world had just collapsed. Who is Marcus Webb? David asked, his voice deadly quiet. I pulled out the photographs Pete had taken. Jessica entering the motel with Marcus, the two of them sharing intimate dinners while David worked late. Jessica handing Marcus envelopes of money that should have gone to their children's future. David studied the photographs with the systematic attention of an engineer analyzing structural failure. When he finally looked up, his face was a mask of cold fury. How long? He asked Jessica. 6 months, she whispered. But it's not what you think. He was helping me with the gambling problems. He said he knew people who could help me win back what I'd lost. He was your dealer, I said bluntly. Marcus Webb makes money by introducing desperate people to high-stakes games they can't afford. He's been feeding your addiction while sleeping with you and encouraging you to steal from your family. David stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the kitchen floor. I need some air. He walked out the back door into my garden, leaving Jessica and me alone in the kitchen. She looked at me with a mixture of terror and pleading. John, please. I know I've made mistakes, but I love those children. Don't destroy their family over this. Jessica, you destroyed their family the moment you chose gambling and adultery over your responsibilities as a wife and mother. What do you want? She asked desperately. Money? I'll find a way to pay you back. Just don't tell David everything. I want my grandchildren back in my life. I want the family relationship you stole from me restored. Done. Absolutely. You can see them whenever you want. I studied her face, seeing the desperate calculation behind her tears. Even now, even with her world collapsing around her, Jessica was trying to negotiate, to minimize the consequences of her choices. Jessica, there's something else you need to know about Marcus Webb. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. He's married, has been the whole time he's been sleeping with you. His wife contacted me yesterday after Pete tracked her down. Apparently, Marcus has a history of targeting married women with gambling problems. You're not his first affair, and you won't be his last. The final piece of Jessica's fantasy crumbled. Before my eyes, the man she'd risked everything for, the person she'd trusted with her marriage and her children's future, was just another predator using her weakness for his own gratification. But he said he loved me, she whispered. He loved what you could steal for him. David returned from the garden 10 minutes later, his face set with grim determination. Dad, thank you for bringing this to my attention. Jessica and I have a lot to discuss. Of course, son, but first, there's something I want both of you to know. I pulled out the final folder, the one that would determine whether this family could be saved or would be destroyed forever. I've paid off all the fraudulent debts, every credit card, every personal loan, every illegal obligation Jessica created, in your name. Your credit is clear, your house is safe, and your children's futures are secure. David's mouth fell open. Dad, that's almost $80,000. It's my investment in my grandchildren's stability. Jessica looked at me with something approaching wonder. But why? After everything I've done, why would you help us? I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the garden where Margaret had spent so many happy hours. Because 23 years ago, you took my son's name and became part of this family. Because Emma and Tyler deserve better than having their world destroyed by their mother's mistakes, and because sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal isn't revenge. I turned back to face them both. It's forgiveness. The kitchen fell, silent except for the tick of Margaret's old clock on the wall. Jessica wept quietly, overwhelmed by the magnitude of grace she'd never expected to receive. David stared at me with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. But, I continued, forgiveness doesn't mean there won't be consequences. Jessica, you're going to enter treatment for your gambling addiction. You're going to get a job and start contributing to this family's financial stability. And you're going to rebuild the trust you've destroyed through actions, not words. She nodded eagerly. Yes, absolutely. Whatever it takes. And most importantly, my relationship with Emma and Tyler is non-negotiable. I'm their grandfather, and I will be part of their lives for as long as I draw breath. Of course, Jessica said through her tears. I'm so sorry, John, for everything. I looked at this broken woman, this mother who'd nearly destroyed her children's future for the temporary thrill of gambling, and felt something I'd never expected to feel: pity. Jessica, we all make mistakes. The question is what we do after we realize we've made them. That night, after David and Jessica took the children home, I sat in Margaret's chair and thought about the choice I'd made. I could have destroyed Jessica, completely, exposed her crimes, watched their marriage implode, and fought for custody of my grandchildren in the wreckage. Instead, I'd chosen a different path. I'd shown her that her grandfather's love was stronger than her betrayal, that family bonds could survive even the worst deception when they were rebuilt on truth and accountability. 3 months later, Jessica completed an intensive gambling addiction treatment program. She got a job as a receptionist at a medical office, modest work that slowly began rebuilding her self-respect. David insisted on marriage counseling, and gradually they began reconstructing their relationship on a foundation of honesty rather than enabling. Most importantly, my Tuesday and Thursday afternoons with Emma and Tyler resumed. We're back to our routine of ice cream at Murphy's and woodworking projects in my garage. Tyler's birdhouse is now home to a family of wrens, and Emma's latest painting hangs proudly on my refrigerator. But you know what? I hope this story serves as more than just entertainment. I hope it reminds you that families are worth fighting for, that love is stronger than betrayal, and that sometimes the most powerful revenge is showing someone a better way to live. The weeks following that transformative Sunday dinner revealed the true complexity of rebuilding a family torn apart by deception. While I'd achieved my primary goal of restoring my relationship with Emma and Tyler, I soon discovered that forgiveness and trust are very different things, and that Jessica's path to redemption would be far more challenging than any of us had anticipated. It started with small things. Jessica would arrive 10 minutes late when dropping off the children for our visits, her eyes darting nervously around my house as if she expected judgment to materialize from the walls themselves. When I offered to help with grocery money or utility bills, gestures that had once been routine, she would refuse with an intensity that bordered on panic. "I can't take any more money from you, John," she said one Tuesday afternoon as I walked Emma and Tyler to her car after our usual ice cream excursion. "Not after everything I've done." I understood her guilt, but I also recognized something else. In her behavior, the rigid thinking patterns of someone white-knuckling their way through early recovery. Jessica was so terrified of returning to her old patterns that she'd overcorrected, creating new problems in her attempt to solve the original ones. The gambling addiction treatment program she'd entered was intensive and thorough, requiring 3 group sessions per week, plus individual counseling. David had initially been supportive, driving her to appointments and attending the family sessions when his work schedule allowed. But as the weeks passed, I could see the strain wearing on both of them. "Dad, I don't know if we're going to make it," David confessed during one of our regular coffee meetings at Murphy's. "Every day feels like walking through a minefield. I want to trust her, but every time she's 5 minutes late coming home, or I find a receipt I don't recognize, my mind goes straight to the worst possibilities." I stirred my coffee thoughtfully, watching my son's face carry the weight of a man, trying to rebuild his life while protecting his children from the chaos of adult problems. "Trust isn't a light switch, son. You can't just flip it back on because someone says they're sorry." "Then how do we move forward?" The counselor keeps talking about rebuilding intimacy and creating new patterns, but I feel like I'm married to a stranger. How do I know she won't relapse? How do I know she's not already lying about something else? It was a fair question, and one that struck at the heart of the most difficult aspect of my plan. In choosing forgiveness over destruction, I'd accepted responsibility not just for paying off Jessica's debts, but for helping this family navigate the long, complicated process of healing. "David, what does Jessica do all day now?" "She works at Dr. Morrison's office from 9 to 3, then picks up the kids from school. Evenings are homework, dinner, bedtime routines. Weekends are treatment meetings and family time. Her schedule is completely structured. And how does she seem? Mentally, emotionally?" David was quiet for a long moment. "Fragile, like she's holding herself together through pure willpower. Sometimes I catch her staring off into space with this expression of, I don't know how to describe it, terror, like she's constantly afraid of falling back into old patterns." That afternoon, I made a decision that would prove crucial to Jessica's recovery and our family's future. I called Dr. Sarah Chen, Jessica's addiction counselor, and requested a private consultation. Dr. Chen's office was located in a converted Victorian house on the east side of Cedar Rapids, painted soft blue with white trim that gave it the appearance of a place where healing might actually be possible. She was a woman in her early 50s, with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who'd spent years helping people rebuild their lives from the wreckage of addiction. "Mr. Miller, I appreciate you coming in," Dr. Chen said, as we settled into comfortable chairs in her office. "Jessica has mentioned you frequently in our sessions. Your decision to help rather than punish her has been a significant factor in her recovery progress." "How is she doing, really?" Dr. Chen considered her words carefully. "Jessica is what we call a high-functioning gambling addict. She maintained her family relationships and daily responsibilities even while engaging in destructive behavior. This makes recovery both easier and more difficult." "How so?" "Easier because she has strong external motivations, her children, her marriage, her relationship with you. She's terrified of losing those connections again. More difficult because she's internalized an enormous amount of shame and guilt. She sees herself as fundamentally broken, unworthy of the forgiveness you've offered." I leaned forward. "What can I do to help?" "Continue being consistent and supportive, but don't enable. Jessica needs to rebuild her self-worth through her own actions, not through external validation. The most helpful thing you can do is treat her like a family member in recovery, not like a family member who betrayed you." "Meaning?" "Include her in family decisions. Ask her opinion about the children's activities. Give her opportunities to contribute positively to family dynamics. Right now, she's operating from a position of constant apology. She needs chances to be a valued family member again." Dr. Chen's advice crystallized something I'd been sensing but hadn't articulated. Jessica wasn't just recovering from gambling addiction. She was recovering from the complete destruction of her identity as a wife, mother, and family member. My forgiveness had given her a second chance, but she needed help believing she deserved it. That weekend, I implemented a new strategy. Instead of simply resuming my old role as the generous grandfather, I began actively involving Jessica in decisions about Emma and Tyler's activities. "Jessica, I said during a Saturday afternoon visit. I was thinking about signing Tyler up for the Youth Baseball League this spring. What do you think? She looked startled, as if the idea that her opinion might matter was completely foreign. Do you think he'd enjoy it? That's what I'm asking you. You're with him every day. You know his interests and personality better than anyone. For the first time in months, I saw something other than guilt in Jessica's expression. He's been reading books about baseball statistics, and he mentioned wanting to try sports, but he's worried about not being good enough. So what do you recommend? Maybe we could start with some practice sessions, just throwing the ball around, building his confidence before committing to a team. It was a small moment, but I could see its significance in Jessica's posture. Someone was asking for her maternal insight instead of working around her parental failures. Over the following weeks, I expanded this approach. When Emma expressed interest in art classes, I consulted Jessica about local options. When both children needed new winter coats, I asked Jessica to coordinate the shopping trip with my financial contribution. When planning holiday celebrations, I made sure Jessica understood that her ideas and preferences mattered. The change in family dynamics was gradual but unmistakable. Jessica began speaking more during family gatherings, offering opinions instead of just apologetic agreements. David noticed the shift too, commenting that his wife seemed more like herself than she had in months. But the real test came in February. 4 months after our confrontational Sunday dinner, I was in my garage workshop on a Thursday afternoon, teaching Tyler how to use a hand plane to smooth rough lumber, when Jessica arrived early to pick up the children. Instead of waiting in her car, as had become her habit, she knocked on the garage door. "John, could I talk to you for a minute?" Privately. I sent Tyler inside to wash his hands and help Emma gather her art supplies, then turned to face Jessica. She looked nervous but determined, the expression of someone who'd made a difficult decision. "I need to tell you something," she began. "Yesterday, Marcus Webb called me. My blood pressure spiked, but I kept my expression neutral." "What did he want?" "He said he had a foolproof system for winning at online poker. Claimed he'd been testing it for months and was ready to share it with trusted partners. He said, 'I could make enough money in one weekend to pay you back for all the debts you covered.'" I watched Jessica's face carefully, looking for signs of temptation or wavering resolve. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that I wasn't interested in any gambling systems, that I was in recovery, and that he should never contact me again." Her voice gained strength as she continued. Then I hung up and immediately called Dr. Chen to report the contact. She said it was exactly the right response. I felt a surge of pride that surprised me with its intensity. That must have been difficult. It was. For about 30 seconds I could hear that voice in my head, the one that always said the next. Bet would fix everything. But then I thought about Emma and Tyler, about David, about the trust we're all rebuilding. She paused, meeting my eyes directly. "And I thought about you, John, about how you chose to help me instead of destroying me. I couldn't betray that choice. In that moment I realized that my plan had succeeded beyond my wildest expectations. I hadn't just gotten my grandchildren back, I'd helped save their mother from herself. Jessica, I'm proud of you." "There's something else," she continued. "I've been thinking about what I can do to really make amends, not just with words, but with actions. Dr. Chen suggested I might consider sharing my story with other families dealing with gambling addiction." "What do you mean?" "The treatment center is starting a family support group. They need people who've been through recovery to help newly diagnosed families understand what they're facing. I was thinking I could volunteer, maybe help other wives and mothers who are where I was 6 months ago." The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of wallowing in shame about her past mistakes, Jessica was proposing to transform her experience into help for others facing similar challenges. I think that's an excellent idea. Really? You don't think it's presumptuous for someone who nearly destroyed her own family to advise others? Jessica, sometimes the best teachers are people who've made the mistakes themselves. You understand. Gambling addiction from the inside. You know how it feels to risk everything for the promise of easy money. That's knowledge that could save other families from going through what we've all been through. 6 months later, Jessica was leading her own support group for family members affected by gambling addiction. Her sessions regularly drew 15 to 20 participants, and the treatment center credited her program with significantly improving their family recovery success rates. But more importantly, our family had found its new normal. David and Jessica renewed their wedding vows on their 10th anniversary, a small ceremony in my backyard garden with Emma and Tyler as witnesses. Tyler made the varsity baseball team in middle school, and Emma's artwork earned her a scholarship to a summer program for young artists. And every Tuesday and Thursday, I pick up my grandchildren from school in my old Chevy Silverado, listening to their stories and sharing ice cream at Murphy's, exactly as it should be. Sometimes people ask me if I ever regret choosing forgiveness over revenge. The answer is simple. Revenge would have given me temporary satisfaction, but would have permanently destroyed my family. Forgiveness gave me something far more valuable. It gave me back my grandchildren and taught them that love is stronger than betrayal, that families can survive even the worst mistakes when they face them together. That's a lesson worth more than any revenge could ever be. 1 year after that life-changing Sunday dinner, I thought our family's story of redemption and forgiveness was complete. Jessica had successfully completed her addiction treatment. David and Jessica's marriage was stronger than it had been in years, and my relationship with Emma and Tyler had not only been restored, but had deepened through the shared experience of weathering a family crisis together. But life, I was learning, has a way of testing the foundations you think you've built. It was a crisp October morning in 2024 when the first crack appeared in our carefully reconstructed family harmony. I was having coffee in my kitchen, reading the Cedar Rapids Gazette, and enjoying the autumn sunlight streaming through Margaret's lace curtains, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Miller, this is Detective Rodriguez with the Cedar Rapids Police Department. I'm calling about a complaint filed against you yesterday evening." My hand tightened around the coffee cup. "What kind of complaint?" "A harassment complaint, sir, filed by one Marcus Webb. He claims you've been engaging in systematic intimidation and stalking behavior over the past several months." I set down my coffee carefully, my mind racing. Marcus Webb, Jessica's former lover and gambling enabler, the man who disappeared from our lives after Jessica's recovery began. Why was he suddenly resurfacing now? "Detective Rodriguez, I haven't had any contact with Mr. Webb since last year. I'm not sure what he's claiming, but, sir, he's provided documentation of what he says are threatening phone calls, emails, and surveillance activities. He's requested a restraining order. I need to ask you to come in for questioning this afternoon." 2 hours later, I sat in an interview room at the Cedar Rapids police station, feeling like a criminal for the first time in my 63 years. Detective Rodriguez was a professional woman in her 40s who treated me with courtesy but obvious suspicion. "Mr. Miller, Mr. Webb claims you've been calling his business line and hanging up when he answers. He says you've driven past his office multiple times and that you sent him threatening emails from anonymous accounts." I shook my head firmly. "Detective, I can account for my activities on any day you'd like to check. I pick up my grandchildren from school twice a week. I attend their baseball games and art shows. I have coffee with my son every Saturday morning. I have no interest in Marcus Webb except to ensure he stays away from my family." He also claims, You hired private investigators to monitor his activities, and that you've been spreading rumors about his business practices in the local real estate community. This accusation hit closer to home. I had used Pete Kowalski's services to investigate Marcus during Jessica's crisis, and I had shared information about his predatory behavior with other business owners in Cedar Rapids. But that was nearly a year ago, and it had been done to protect my family, not to harass Marcus. Detective, last year I discovered that Mr. Webb was encouraging my daughter-in-law's gambling addiction while conducting an extramarital affair with her. I hired a private investigator to document this behavior for family protection purposes, but I haven't had any contact with Mr. Webb or investigated his activities since my daughter-in-law entered recovery. Detective Rodriguez studied my face carefully. Mr. Miller, are you aware that Mr. Webb's real estate business failed 6 months ago, that he's currently facing personal bankruptcy and has been evicted from his office? I wasn't aware of any of this, but I had a sinking feeling about where this conversation was heading. He claims your harassment campaign destroyed his reputation and drove away his clients. He's threatening both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit for damages. I left the police station 2 hours later with a temporary restraining order requiring me to stay at least 500 feet away from Marcus Webb and his residence, along with instructions to hire an attorney. The irony was bitter. In choosing forgiveness over revenge, I tried to rebuild my family quietly and privately. Now, I was being accused of conducting exactly the kind of vindictive campaign I deliberately avoided. That evening, I called an emergency family meeting. David arrived at my house looking worried and confused, Jessica pale with the kind of terror I hadn't seen since her gambling crisis. Emma and Tyler stayed with David's neighbor, unaware that their grandfather was facing potential criminal charges. "Dad, this is insane," David said after I explained the situation. "You've been with us, or the kids, almost every day for the past year. When would you have had time to stalk Marcus Webb?" "I don't understand," Jessica said, her voice shaking. "Marcus hasn't contacted me since that phone call last February. Why is he doing this now?" I pulled out the papers Detective Rodriguez had given me, spreading them across my kitchen table. The harassment complaints were detailed and specific. Phone records showing calls from untraceable numbers to Marcus's business line, emails sent from anonymous accounts threatening to expose his true nature, sightings of my truck near his office and residence. "Someone has been harassing Marcus Webb," I said grimly. "But it wasn't me." David leaned forward, his engineer's mind analyzing the evidence methodically. "Dad, these phone calls supposedly happened on days when you were with Emma and Tyler, and this email that talks about destroying the man who corrupted my daughter-in-law, that's not how you talk." He was right. The language in the threatening emails was crude and vindictive, nothing like my usual direct but measured communication style. Someone was framing me for harassment I hadn't committed, using my known conflict with Marcus as cover. For their own campaign against him. But who? Jessica asked. Who else would want to hurt Marcus? The answer came to me with sudden, terrible clarity. His ex-wife. I remembered Pete's investigation from the previous year. Marcus Webb had been married when he began his affair with Jessica, and his divorce had been finalized just months before his business started failing. A woman scorned, watching her ex-husband's life fall apart while being unable to claim credit for his downfall. She's using me as cover, I realized. If Marcus thinks I'm the one harassing him, he won't suspect his ex-wife. And if he tries to fight back against me, it looks like he's targeting the grandfather who exposed his affair. David pulled out his phone. We need to call Pete Kowalski. If someone's framing you, we need evidence to prove it. But Jessica placed her hand on his arm, stopping him. Wait. Before we do anything else, I need to tell you both something. She took a deep breath, and I saw the same expression she'd worn. During our confrontational Sunday dinner, the look of someone preparing to reveal a painful truth. 2 weeks ago, Marcus called me again. David's face went white. "Jessica, you told us he called once in February and you hung up on him." "He did. But this time was different. He wasn't trying to get me to gamble again. He was scared, desperate. He said someone was destroying his life, making his clients cancel contracts, spreading rumors about his business practices. He wanted to know if I'd hired someone to harass him." I felt my chest tighten. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I didn't know anything about harassment, that I was in recovery and wanted nothing to do with him." "But John," she met my eyes with an expression of terrible understanding. "He said he was going to find out who was destroying him and make them pay. He said he had ways of fighting back that people wouldn't expect." The pieces fell into place, like dominoes. Marcus wasn't just trying to stop harassment. He was trying to frame me for crimes I hadn't committed, using his knowledge of my previous investigation against him as the foundation for false accusations. "It's a preemptive strike," I said slowly. "He knows his ex-wife is behind the harassment, but he can't prove it, so he's trying to destroy me instead, partly for revenge and partly to discredit any future testimony I might give about his character." "But why target you specifically?" David asked. Jessica answered before I could. "Because John has the most credibility in this community. If Marcus can paint him as an obsessed, vindictive old man who's been stalking and harassing people, then anything John says about Marcus's past behavior becomes suspect. It was brilliant in its twisted logic. Marcus was using the very forgiveness and discretion I'd shown over the past year against me. My decision not to publicly destroy him had left his reputation damaged, but not completely annihilated. Now he was trying to rehabilitate himself by painting me as the real villain in our family story. That night, I lay awake in Margaret's and my bedroom, staring at the ceiling and wondering if my choice of mercy over revenge had been naive. If I'd exposed Marcus completely a year ago, if I'd used all the evidence Pete had gathered to destroy him publicly and legally, would he have been in any position to threaten me now? But by morning, I'd reached a different conclusion. Marcus's desperate attempt to frame me wasn't a sign that I'd been wrong to choose forgiveness. It was proof that forgiveness had been the right choice, because it had revealed the true character of everyone involved. Jessica had used her second chance to rebuild her life and help other families facing similar crises. David and I had grown closer through the experience of supporting her recovery. Emma and Tyler had learned that families could survive even serious mistakes when they faced them together with love and honesty. And Marcus had revealed himself to be exactly what I'd suspected all along, a predator who blamed others for his problems and was willing to destroy innocent people to protect his own interests. If still haven't seen Scrivu, este è un momento. Because what happened next would test not just my family's strength, but the very principles I'd built my life upon. The choice between justice and mercy is never simple, especially when the person you've chosen to forgive tries to repay your kindness with betrayal. But sometimes the most powerful response to false accusations isn't anger or revenge. Sometimes it's simply continuing to live according to your values, even when others try to destroy you for them. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Pete Kowalski called at 7 a.m., his voice carrying the excitement of a detective who just solved a complex case. "John, you need to get down to my office immediately. I've got something that's going to blow this harassment frame up wide open." I arrived at Pete's office 30 minutes later to find him surrounded by computer printouts, surveillance photos, and what appeared to be audio equipment. His usual methodical demeanor was replaced by barely contained enthusiasm. "Tell me you've got good news, Pete." "Better than good. I've got proof that Marcus Webb has been orchestrating this entire harassment campaign himself." Pete handed me a series of photographs taken with a telephoto lens. Marcus Webb sitting in his car outside his own office building, talking on a cell phone. Marcus entering a FedEx store with a manila envelope. Marcus using a computer at the Cedar Rapids Public Library. "I started surveillance on Webb the day you got arrested," Pete explained. Something about his story didn't add up. If someone was really harassing him systematically, why would he be so specific about it being you? Why not just report anonymous harassment? "What did you find?" Pete pulled out a thick folder. Marcus Webb has been creating his own harassment evidence. Those anonymous phone calls, made from burner phones he purchased himself. The threatening emails, sent from public computer terminals using fake accounts he created. Even the sightings of your truck near his property. He's been driving past his own house and office, then filing police reports claiming you were stalking him. I stared at the evidence, feeling a mixture of relief and disgust. But why go to such elaborate lengths? Because Marcus Webb is facing more than just business failure and personal bankruptcy. 3 weeks ago, the Iowa Real Estate Commission opened an investigation into his business practices, specifically allegations that he's been steering clients into high-risk investment schemes that benefit his personal associates. Pete pulled out another set of documents. Remember those private poker games he was running? Turns out they weren't just illegal gambling operations. Marcus was using his position as a real estate agent to identify wealthy clients, then introducing them to investment opportunities that were actually elaborate Ponzi schemes. The scope of Marcus's criminal activity was staggering. He hadn't just been enabling Jessica's gambling addiction. He'd been using his real estate business as a front for investment fraud that had cost his clients hundreds of thousands of dollars. The state investigation is what prompted his ex-wife to start the real harassment campaign, Pete continued. She's been providing evidence to investigators about Marcus's illegal activities. She wants to make sure he goes to prison for what he did to their marriage and their finances. So when Marcus realized his ex-wife was cooperating with investigators, he decided to create a distraction by framing you for harassment. If he could convince authorities that he was the victim of an obsessed stalker, it would undermine any evidence against him and potentially discredit the investigation itself. I sat back in my chair, amazed by the complexity of Marcus's deception. In trying to frame me for crimes I hadn't committed, he'd revealed the extent of his actual criminal behavior. "Pete, how do we prove this?" "Already done." Pete grinned and pulled out a small digital recorder. "Yesterday afternoon, I posed as a potential client interested in some of Marcus's exclusive investment opportunities. He spent 2 hours explaining how he could help me hide money from tax authorities and get guaranteed returns through private gaming circles. You recorded him confessing to fraud?" "Better than that. He offered to split the proceeds if I could help him deal with the harassment problem he was facing. When I asked what he meant, he suggested that a man with my investigative skills might be able to find evidence that you were stalking him, even if that evidence needed to be enhanced for clarity." Pete played the recording, and Marcus's voice filled the office with casual discussions of evidence fabrication and witness intimidation. In his desperation to escape justice for his real crimes, Marcus had confessed to additional crimes while trying to recruit Pete as an accomplice. "This recording goes to Detective Rodriguez this afternoon," Pete said, along with documentation of Marcus's self-directed harassment campaign and evidence of his investment fraud schemes. But as I listened to Marcus's recorded voice casually discussing ways to destroy my reputation and potentially frame me for crimes that could send me to prison, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this nightmare began: genuine anger. For a year, I'd chosen mercy over justice, Forgiveness over revenge. I'd paid Jessica's debts, supported her recovery, and rebuilt our family relationships through patience and understanding. I deliberately avoided destroying Marcus Webb because I believed that healing was more important than punishment. And how had Marcus repaid my restraint? By trying to send me to prison for crimes I hadn't committed. Pete, I want you to do something else for me. Name it. I want you to contact Marcus's victims, the people who lost money in his investment schemes. I want to help them recover their losses and ensure they have the best possible legal representation when they file charges against him. Pete raised an eyebrow. John, that could cost you a significant amount of money. Marcus Webb has spent the past year free to victimize other families because I chose not to expose him completely. Those families deserve justice, and they deserve restitution for the harm he's caused them. That afternoon, Detective Rodriguez called to inform me that the harassment charges had been dropped and that Marcus Webb was being arrested on multiple felony counts, including fraud, racketeering, and filing false police reports. The restraining order against me was dissolved, and the prosecutor was considering whether to file additional charges against Marcus for attempting to frame an innocent person. But my real satisfaction came 3 weeks later, when Pete handed me a list of 17 families who had lost money in Marcus's investment schemes. Working with attorneys I'd hired, we were able to recover nearly 80% of their losses through asset seizure and insurance claims. More importantly, several of these families had been dealing with gambling addictions that Marcus had encouraged and exploited. Jessica volunteered to work with them through the treatment center's family support program, turning her own recovery experience into help for others who'd been victimized by the same predator. You know what the ironic part is? Jessica said during one of our family dinners 6 months later. If Marcus had just left us alone, if he'd accepted that his relationship with me was over and moved on with his life, he probably could have avoided most of these consequences. How so? David asked. The state investigation into his business practices was focused on recent activities. If he'd stopped the investment fraud and laid low, he might have gotten away with what he'd already undone. But by trying to frame Dad, he created a paper trail that led investigators directly to his other crimes. I looked around my dining room table at my family, David and Jessica, rebuilding their marriage on a foundation of honesty, Emma and Tyler, growing into remarkable young people who understood that families could survive even serious mistakes when they faced them together. Everyone was healthy, everyone was healing, everyone was moving forward. Sometimes, I said, raising my coffee cup in a toast, the best revenge is simply living a good life and letting other people's choices catch up with them. Marcus Webb was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison for investment fraud and racketeering. His conviction made the front page of the Cedar Rapids Gazette, along with interviews from families who'd been helped by the Victim Assistance Fund I'd established. But you know what made me proudest? The article also mentioned Jessica's work with gambling addiction families and the success stories of people who'd found recovery through the program she'd helped develop. In trying to destroy me through false accusations, Marcus had inadvertently brought more attention to the positive work our family was doing in the community. His attempt at revenge had become a platform for helping even more families facing similar challenges. 6 months later, I received a letter from Marcus in federal prison. He wanted to apologize, claimed he'd found religion behind bars, said he understood now that his actions had been motivated by pride and fear rather than justice. I read the letter once and threw it away. Some people deserve forgiveness when they make mistakes and sincerely try to make amends. But people who try to destroy innocent families to cover up their own crimes, they deserve exactly what they get, the consequences of their own choices. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to let someone's hatred poison your heart, even when they've tried their best to destroy your life. 2 years had passed since Marcus Webb's conviction, and life had settled into the kind of comfortable routine that I'd once taken for granted. Emma, now 10, had discovered a passion for photography and spent our afternoons together documenting the changing seasons in Cedar Rapids. Tyler, equally 10 but older in his scholarly wisdom, had progressed from building birdhouses to designing elaborate tree houses that we constructed together in my backyard oak tree. Jessica had been promoted to office manager at Dr. Morrison's practice and was completing her bachelor's degree in social work through evening classes. David had received a significant promotion that allowed him to work from home 3 days a week, giving him more time with the children and strengthening his marriage to Jessica in ways that their early years together had never achieved. Our family had not just survived Jessica's betrayal and Marcus's vindictive campaign. We had emerged stronger, more honest, and more appreciative of the bonds that truly matter, which is why what happened on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in March 2026 caught me completely off guard. I was in my workshop, teaching Tyler how to use a router to create decorative edges on a jewelry box he was making for Emma's upcoming birthday, when Jessica arrived early to pick up the children. But instead of her usual cheerful greeting, she appeared in my garage doorway with an expression of barely controlled panic. "John, we need to talk, privately, right now." I sent Tyler inside to help Emma clean up her photography supplies, then turned to face Jessica. In the 2 years since her recovery began, I'd learned to read the subtle signs of her emotional state. This wasn't anxiety about a work problem or concern about the children's school performance. This was the look of someone whose carefully rebuilt world was threatening to collapse again. "What's wrong?" She pulled out her phone and showed me a text message from an unknown number. "I know what you did to Marcus Webb. Pay me $50,000 or your family finds out who really destroyed his life." My blood went cold. "When did you receive this?" 20 minutes ago. "John, I swear I don't know what this person is talking about. I had nothing to do with Marcus getting arrested. That was all his own doing." I studied the message carefully, my mind racing through possibilities. Someone was trying to extort money from Jessica by claiming she'd been responsible for Marcus's downfall. But who would have both the knowledge and the motivation to attempt such a scheme? "Jessica, have you told David about this?" "Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first because..." She hesitated, then met my eyes with the honesty that had become her trademark since recovery. "Because I was afraid he might think I was hiding something again. Our trust is still fragile, John. If David thinks I'm keeping secrets or involved in something criminal..." I understood her fear. David had forgiven Jessica's gambling addiction and affair, but that forgiveness came with the understanding that complete honesty would govern their relationship going forward. Even the appearance of deception could shatter the trust they'd worked so hard to rebuild. "Jessica, you need to show me every communication you've had with anyone regarding Marcus Webb over the past 6 months." She handed me her phone without hesitation, the action itself demonstrating how much her relationship with secrecy had changed. I scrolled through her call log, text messages and email accounts, looking for any contact that might have triggered this extortion attempt. What I found was exactly what I expected: nothing. Jessica had maintained zero contact with Marcus or anyone associated with him since his arrest. Her communications were limited to family, work colleagues, addiction recovery support groups, and school-related activities for the children. John, who could even know enough about our situation to attempt something like this? The answer came to me with uncomfortable clarity. Someone who was involved in the original investigation. Someone who has access to information that wasn't made public during Marcus's trial. I pulled out my own phone and called Pete Kowalski. If someone was trying to extort money by threatening to expose non-existent secrets, Pete would be able to Trace the communication and identify the blackmailer. Pete, I need your help again. We've got an extortion situation. What kind of extortion? I explained the threatening text message while Pete took notes. His response was immediate and professional. John, this sounds like someone fishing for information rather than someone who actually knows anything incriminating. Real blackmailers don't ask for money without providing specific evidence of wrongdoing. This person is hoping Jessica will panic and pay money to protect secrets that don't exist. So what do? We set a trap. Whoever sent this message expects Jessica to be frightened and compliant. Instead, we're going to draw them out and identify them. An hour later, Pete had established a secure communication protocol that would allow us to trace any further contact from the extortionist while protecting Jessica from direct exposure to threats. His plan was elegant in its simplicity. Jessica would respond to the blackmail attempt by demanding proof of whatever wrongdoing they claimed to have evidence of. Jessica typed the message under Pete's guidance. I don't know what you're talking about. If you have evidence of something, show me specifically what you think you know. The response came within minutes. Your father-in-law didn't just investigate Marcus Webb. He destroyed him systematically, and you helped by providing inside information about Marcus's personal life. I have recordings of phone calls between you and John Miller planning Marcus's destruction. I stared at the message, feeling a mixture of anger and confusion. Someone was claiming to have recordings of conversations that had never happened, involving crimes that had never been committed. This person is bluffing, Pete said after reading the message. They're hoping Jessica will assume they have real evidence and pay money rather than risk exposure. Classic extortion psychology, but Jessica looked genuinely terrified. John, what if they do have recordings? What if they've somehow taken our legitimate conversations about Marcus and twisted them to sound like we were planning to frame him? It was a valid concern. Any recorded conversation between Jessica and me about Marcus's behavior could potentially be edited or taken out of context to suggest conspiracy rather than family protection. Jessica, do you remember having any conversations with me about Marcus that could be misinterpreted? She thought carefully. Last year, when you were helping those families who lost money in his investment schemes, I might have mentioned things about his personality that could help their legal cases. And when he tried to frame you for harassment, we definitely discussed his character and motivations. Those conversations, recorded without our knowledge and edited maliciously, could indeed be presented as evidence of conspiracy. Someone with access to surveillance equipment and knowledge of our family situation could potentially create the appearance of criminal coordination between Jessica and me. Pete, we need to trace this communication immediately. If someone's been conducting illegal surveillance on my family, I want them identified and prosecuted. Already working on it. Give me 48 hours. That evening, I called another family meeting. This time I included Emma and Tyler because whatever was happening needed to be addressed honestly rather than hidden from the children who'd already lived through one family crisis. Kids, I began as we gathered in my living room. Sometimes, when families face difficult situations and make good choices, there are people who try to cause trouble afterward. Tyler, now 10 and remarkably perceptive, asked the question I'd been dreading. Is someone trying to hurt our family again, Grandpa John? Someone is trying to scare your mum by claiming she did something wrong, even though she hasn't. It's like if someone accused you of cheating on a test when you actually studied very hard and earned your grade honestly. Emma, with the artistic sensitivity that reminded me so much of Margaret, immediately understood the emotional implications. Is Mom going to be okay? Are we going to have to go through everything like before? Jessica knelt down to Emma's level, her voice steady despite the fear I could see in her eyes. Sweetheart, this is different from before. before I actually had made mistakes that I needed to fix. This time, someone is lying about me, and we're going to prove they're lying. David had been quiet throughout this explanation, but now he spoke with the calm determination that had made him successful in his engineering career. "Dad, what do you need us to do?" "Right now, we stay calm and let Pete trace this communication. But I want everyone to understand that we're dealing with someone who's willing to threaten our family to get money. That means we need to be extra careful about our security and communications until this is resolved." 48 hours later, Pete called with news that would shock us all. "John, I've traced the extortion messages. You're not going to believe." "Who's behind this?" "Who?" "Marcus Webb's ex-wife, Linda. She's been monitoring your family's activities for over a year, hoping to find evidence that you were involved in destroying Marcus beyond what came out in the official investigation." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Linda Webb had been the source of the original harassment campaign against Marcus that he tried to frame me for. Now she was trying to extort money from Jessica by claiming we'd been conspirators in her ex-husband's downfall. But Pete, why would she target Jessica specifically? Because Linda Webb has spent 2 years watching Marcus face consequences for his crimes, while she received no financial compensation for what he put her through during their marriage. She's bitter, broke, and looking for someone to blame for her continued misfortune. And she chose Jessica because Jessica was Marcus's affair partner, which makes her a perfect target for Linda's rage. Linda can't get revenge against Marcus. He's in federal prison. So she's trying to get revenge against the woman he cheated with, even though Jessica was as much a victim of Marcus's manipulation as Linda was. The psychology was twisted but understandable. Linda Webb couldn't accept that her ex-husband's destruction had been entirely self-inflicted. She needed someone else to blame, someone she could punish for the years of suffering Marcus had caused her. But what Linda didn't understand was that she'd chosen to threaten the wrong family. We'd already survived betrayal, addiction, false accusations, and a vindictive criminal conspiracy. We'd emerged stronger because we'd faced those challenges with honesty, unity, and an unwavering commitment to protecting each other. Linda Webb was about to discover that threatening a family that had already been through hell and back was a very, very bad idea. Pete's investigation into Linda Webb revealed a woman whose life had spiraled into obsession and desperation since her ex-husband's conviction. Living in a cramped apartment in Des Moines, surviving on part-time retail work and whatever assistance she could get from social services, Linda had spent the past 2 years nursing her rage against everyone she held responsible for her misfortune. "She's been conducting surveillance on your family for 14 months, Pete reported during our meeting at his office. "Phone records show she's called Jessica's workplace multiple times, claiming to be conducting employment verification for various companies. She's driven past your house, David's house, even followed Jessica to the treatment center where she volunteers. I felt sick thinking about this unstable woman watching my grandchildren, tracking their routines, potentially putting them at risk because of her twisted need for revenge. How much does she actually know about our family situation?" Pete spread out a collection of photographs and documents across his desk. "More than she should, but less than she's claiming. Linda's been taking pictures of family gatherings, recording license plate numbers, even going through garbage to piece together information about your activities. The photos were disturbing in their intimate detail. Emma and Tyler playing in my backyard, Jessica picking up the children from school, family dinners visible through my dining room windows. Linda Webb had been stalking my family with the dedication of a private investigator, building a file of our daily activities and relationships. But here's the crucial point," Pete continued. "Everything Linda actually knows came from public records, social media posts, and physical surveillance. She doesn't have any recordings of private conversations because there were no private conversations about conspiracy against Marcus. She's bluffing about evidence that doesn't exist. So her extortion threat is completely fabricated, completely. But that doesn't make her less dangerous. Linda Webb is a desperate woman who's convinced herself that your family owes her compensation for Marcus's crimes. When desperate people don't get what they want through extortion, they sometimes escalate to more direct forms of harassment or retaliation. That afternoon, I made a decision that would bring this nightmare to an end once and for all. Pete, I want you to arrange a meeting with Linda Webb. John, that's not a good idea. Direct contact with someone who's been threatening your family could be dangerous. Not if it's handled properly. Linda Webb wants money and someone to blame. For her problems, I'm going to give her both. What do you mean? I leaned forward in my chair, my mind already working through the strategy that would neutralize Linda's threat while addressing the legitimate grievances that had driven her to desperation. Linda Webb lost her marriage, her financial security, and her future because of Marcus's criminal behavior. Her mistake is blaming Jessica and me for consequences that Marcus brought on himself. But her pain is real, and her financial situation is genuinely desperate. So what are you proposing? I'm going to offer Linda Webb a settlement, not because we've done anything wrong, but because sometimes the most powerful way to defeat an enemy is to turn them into an ally. Pete stared at me for a long moment. John, you can't keep solving every family crisis by throwing money at it. I'm not throwing money at this problem, Pete. I'm making a strategic investment in my family's long-term security. 2 days later, I sat across from Linda Webb in a conference room at Pete's office. She was a woman in her early 50s, thin and worn down by years of stress and disappointment. Her clothes were clean but inexpensive, her hair styled simply, her entire appearance speaking to someone who'd once had more, but was now struggling to maintain basic dignity. Linda's eyes carried the hard suspicion of someone who'd been disappointed too many times to trust easily. But beneath the hostility I could see something else, exhaustion from carrying anger that was eating her alive. Ms. Webb, I began, I understand you've been having some financial difficulties since your divorce. I don't need your pity, she snapped. I want justice for what your family did to destroy Marcus. Ms. Webb, Marcus destroyed himself. The investment fraud, the illegal gambling operations, the evidence fabrication, those were his choices, not ours. But you investigated him. You exposed his personal life, ruined his reputation in the community. I studied her face, seeing the desperation behind her accusations. Ms. Webb, would you rather Marcus had continued victimizing families like yours? Would you prefer that he'd kept running illegal schemes that put other people's financial security at risk? That's not the point. The point is that I suffered for his mistakes, and no one has done anything to help me recover what I lost. And there it was, the real source of Linda's anger. Not rage at Marcus for destroying their marriage, but fury at a system that had punished him while leaving her to rebuild her life alone. Ms. Webb, what would it take for you to feel like justice has been served? She was quiet for a long moment, clearly not expecting this question. I want compensation for the years I wasted married to that criminal. I want recognition that I was as much a victim of his schemes as anyone else he defrauded. How much compensation? $50,000, the same amount I asked your daughter-in-law for. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a cashier's check that Pete had helped me prepare. Linda Webb's eyes widened as she saw the amount. $75,000. This check is made out to you personally, I said. It's not hush money, and it's not an admission of wrongdoing. It's a settlement that recognizes you as a victim of Marcus Webb's criminal behavior. Linda stared at the check, like it might disappear if she looked away. What's the catch? 3 conditions. First, You sign a legal agreement acknowledging that neither Jessica nor I conspired against Marcus in any way, and that you will make no further contact with any member of my family." She nodded slowly. "Second, you agree to enter counseling to address the depression and anger that have been controlling your life for the past 2 years. And third, you use a portion of this money to complete job training or education that will give you better employment opportunities. This settlement isn't just about ending a conflict, it's about giving you the resources to build a better future." Linda Webb sat in stunned silence, holding the check with trembling hands. "Why are you doing this? After everything I've done, to threaten your family, why would you help me?" I thought about the question carefully before answering. "Ms. Webb, 2 years ago, my daughter-in-law made terrible mistakes that nearly destroyed our family. I had the choice to punish her or help her rebuild her life. I chose to help, and that decision saved not just her, but our entire family. But I tried to extort money from you. I stalked your grandchildren. Yes, you did. And those were serious. Mistakes that could have had legal consequences. But I recognize that your actions came from pain and desperation, not evil intent. Given the chance to start over with adequate resources and professional support, I believe you can make better choices." Linda began crying, not the manipulative tears of someone trying to gain sympathy, but the genuine grief of someone finally acknowledging the depth of their own suffering. "I've been so angry for so long," she whispered. "I blamed everyone except Marcus for what happened to our marriage. I convinced myself that if I could just punish someone, if I could make someone else pay for what he put me through, then I'd feel better. And did it make you feel better? No. It made everything worse. I became someone I don't recognize, someone who would threaten innocent children to get revenge against their grandmother." I reached across the table and gently took the check from her hands, replacing it with a pen and the settlement agreement Pete had prepared. "Ms. Webb, you have a choice. You can continue carrying this anger and let it destroy what's left of your life, or you can sign this agreement, take this money, and use it to build something better." She signed the document without hesitation. 6 months later, Linda Webb sent me a letter from the community college in Des Moines, where she was studying medical office administration. She'd completed a counseling program, found stable housing, and was working part-time in a job that had potential for advancement. Most importantly, she'd found peace with the end of her marriage and Marcus's imprisonment. The letter included an apology to Jessica and my family, along with a promise that she understood our kindness as the gift it was and would honor it by building a life worthy of the second chance we'd given her. That Christmas, our family celebrated not just Emma and Tyler's continued growth and Jessica's ongoing recovery, but the knowledge that even our enemies could be transformed into allies when they were shown mercy instead of judgment. "Dad," David said as we watched the children open presents under my Christmas tree, "I'm starting to understand something about the way you handle conflicts." "What's that, son?" "You don't just solve problems, you solve them in ways that leave everyone better than they were before." I looked around my living room at the family that had survived betrayal, false accusations, extortion attempts, and vindictive harassment. We'd emerged not just intact, but stronger, more united, and more committed to treating even our enemies with the kind of grace that transforms rather than destroys. "David, your mother taught me something important before she died. She said that the measure of a man isn't how he treats people who can help him, but how he treats people who have hurt him. And how should we treat people who have hurt us?" I smiled, watching Emma show Tyler the new camera I'd bought her, listening to their excited chatter about the photos they would take together. We should treat them the way we hope someone would treat us if we were the ones who had made terrible mistakes. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is showing someone that they're worthy of redemption, even when they've tried their best to destroy you. 3 years have passed since Linda Webb signed that settlement agreement, and as I sit in my workshop, on this quiet Sunday afternoon in October 2029, watching Tyler, now 13, carefully sand the jewelry box he's making for Emma's 14th birthday, I find myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey our family has traveled together. The workshop around us tells the story better than words ever could. Hand tools that belong to my father hang alongside power tools I've accumulated over 40 years in construction. Projects in various stages of completion line the workbenches. A birdhouse Tyler designed using engineering principles he's learning. In advanced math, a picture frame Emma carved with intricate floral patterns that showcase her artistic evolution, and a toy chest I'm building for Jessica's newest volunteer project, a program that provides handmade gifts for children in foster care. Grandpa John, Tyler says, pausing in his sanding to examine the wood grain with the same careful attention to detail that has made him excel in every subject at school. Do you ever regret not destroying Jessica's life when you had the chance? The question catches me off guard, not because it's inappropriate. Tyler has always been remarkably mature for his age, but because it demonstrates how clearly he understands the choices I made during our family crisis. What makes you ask that, son? We're studying ethics in social studies class about how different people respond to being wronged. My teacher said that most people choose revenge when they have the power to hurt someone who hurt them first. He sets down his sandpaper and looks at me with those serious brown eyes that remind me so much of David at that age. But you chose to help Jessica instead of destroying her. I want to understand why. I pull up a chair beside his workbench, recognizing this as one of those grandfather moments that will stay with him for the rest of his life. Tyler, when your grandmother was dying, she told me something that changed how I think about difficult situations. She said that anyone can tear something down, but it takes real strength to build something better. But Jessica lied to you. She stole from your family. She tried to take Emma and me away from you forever. Yes, she did all those things, and I could have destroyed her life completely. I had evidence of her gambling addiction, her affair, her theft of family money. I could have exposed everything publicly, sent her to prison, fought for custody of you and Emma, and made sure she lost everything. Tyler nods thoughtfully. But you didn't. No, I didn't. And do you know what the result has been? Tyler looks around the workshop, then toward the house where we can hear Emma laughing as she helps Jessica prepare Sunday dinner, where David is probably grading papers at the kitchen table, where the warm sounds of family life fill every room. Our family got stronger instead of getting destroyed. Exactly. If I'd chosen revenge, Jessica would be in prison, your parents would be divorced, and you and Emma would be caught between two broken homes with a grandfather who taught you that love is conditional on perfect behavior. I stand up and walk to the window that overlooks my backyard, where the oak tree now supports an elaborate treehouse that Tyler and I built together last summer. Emma's photography equipment is set up on the deck, capturing the autumn light filtering through leaves that will soon fall and return as spring growth. Tyler, the most important lesson I can teach you is this: when someone hurts you, you have a choice. You can hurt them back, which makes everyone weaker, or you can respond in a way that makes everyone stronger. But what if they don't deserve forgiveness? It's the question I've wrestled with for years, the one that goes to the heart of every family crisis we've faced. Son, forgiveness isn't about what people deserve. It's about who you choose to be. Jessica didn't deserve my help when she was stealing from our family and planning to disappear with you and Emma. Marcus Webb didn't deserve mercy when he tried to frame me for crimes I didn't commit. Linda Webb didn't deserve a settlement when she was extorting money and stalking our family. Then why did you help all of them? Because I chose to be the kind of man your grandmother would have been proud of. Because I chose to be the kind of grandfather I wanted you and Emma to remember. And because I learned that the most powerful way to defeat your enemies is to turn them into people who are grateful for your kindness. Tyler considers this carefully, his engineer's mind working through the logic of grace and consequence. So, Jessica became a better person because you showed her mercy instead of judgment. Jessica became a better person because she was given the chance to prove she could be better. The same is true for Linda Webb, who's now using her education to help other women escape abusive relationships. Even Marcus Webb might find redemption someday, though that's his choice to make. From inside the house, Emma calls out that dinner is ready. Tyler carefully puts away his tools with the same methodical precision I've tried to model for him over the years, while I reflect on how much this family has grown through trials that could have destroyed us. As we walk toward the house together, Tyler asks one more question. Grandpa John, what would you tell other grandparents who are going through what you went through? I pause at the back door, looking through the window at my family gathered around the dinner table. Jessica serves food she prepared using recipes Margaret left behind, her face carrying the peace of someone who's found her way back from the brink of self-destruction. David says grace with the gratitude of a man who almost lost everything but chose to fight for what mattered most. Emma shows off the photographs she took this week, each image capturing moments of beauty and joy that exist because we chose healing over revenge. I would tell them that families are worth fighting for, but the way you fight matters. I would tell them that love is always stronger than anger, that forgiveness is always more powerful than revenge, and that sometimes the greatest victory is showing your enemies that they're worthy of redemption. Even when they've tried to destroy you, especially when they've tried to destroy you, because that's when mercy becomes truly powerful, when it's extended to people who don't deserve it but desperately need it. We enter the warm kitchen where Sunday dinner waits, where conversation flows easily between three generations who've learned that honesty is more valuable than harmony, that trust can be rebuilt even after betrayal, and that love expressed through action is stronger than any force that tries to tear families apart. As I look around this table at faces I nearly lost to Jessica's deception, I realize that my story isn't really about revenge at all. It's about the power of choosing grace over justice, mercy over judgment, and love over fear. 3 years ago, I could have destroyed Jessica Webb and felt justified in doing so. Instead, I chose to save her, and in saving her, I saved my entire family. That choice didn't just bring Emma and Tyler back into my life. It taught them that their grandfather was someone who could be trusted with their hearts, even when those hearts had been broken. It showed David that his father would fight for family unity rather than personal vindication. It proved to Jessica that redemption was possible, even after the worst mistakes. Most importantly, it demonstrated to everyone who knows our story that sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal isn't revenge. Sometimes it's forgiveness that changes everyone it touches. So I ask you, watching this story of family betrayal and restoration, what would you have done in my situation? When someone you trusted tried to steal your most precious relationships, would you have chosen destruction or redemption? I hope you would have chosen what I chose, because the world has enough revenge, enough anger, enough families destroyed by the need to punish mistakes rather than heal them. What the world needs more of is grandfathers who choose mercy over judgment, families who choose unity over vindication, and love that proves stronger than any betrayal. That's the revenge I chose, showing my enemies that love wins every single time. And you know what? I would make the same choice again tomorrow. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever chosen forgiveness over revenge? What happened when you extended mercy to someone who had wronged you? Your stories might inspire other families facing similar challenges. To hear another story of family restoration and the power of unexpected grace, click on the video recommendation that appears on your screen. Thank you for being part of this community of people who believe that love is always stronger than hate.